The smartphone market is vast, and it's been that way for over 20 years. There have been many successes and many failures in the market. But what is the throne contender for the most innovative smartphone ever released? Well, many would say the iPhone, and that's not wrong, because before iPhone, after iPhone. But another great contender in my eyes is the great Palm Pre line of devices. It was at one time an alternative to the other two big players, and it was lining up to be iOS, Android, and WebOS, aka the operating system that ran on these Palm devices. So what happened? Well, Palm was bought out, and the platform never truly got to stretch its legs, sadly. So let's dive into this very innovative platform, and in my opinion, one of the most innovative platforms ever released in the idea of smartphones. And an idea that still even today, many smartphone operating systems are stealing and picking apart WebOS's carcass, basically, because of how innovative it was. Let's dive in. The exact device we'll be looking at today was the Palm Pre 2, although of course there was the Pre 1 and a later, better version, the Pre 3. But that Pre 3 is actually quite rare today, and the Pre 1 is it's actually quite laggy. So this is the perfect middle ground in my opinion. Specifications wise, it comes in at 512 megabytes of RAM, which was around the normal for that time. A 3.1 inch display, which was pretty small, even for the time when you would see 3.5, but still, the small display was kind of the thing with Palm, at least on this line of devices. So not bad at all. And camera wise, it has a 5 megapixel shooter with flash. Now, it sounds pretty low, but you'll see some pictures later on, it actually does a pretty good job. CPU wise, has 1 gigahertz, not bad at all. And storage wise was actually quite good at 16 gigabytes, at least on this model we have here. You could store pretty much anything perfectly fine. Connectivity wise, Wi-Fi, the normal stuff, and 3G HSPA, which means in Canada we can still use this device with the cell service towers. Overall, for the time, a pretty damn good phone. Does it hold up? That's going to be the fun part of this device. How does it hold up all the way in 2024? Let's jump in. In our first test of how this device holds up in 2024, we have one of the more vital things people do, and that's web browsing. And it's a mixed bag when it comes to this device. You will need a proxy to web browse, or you're just going to get a whole bunch of certificate errors. But with that proxy running, and I'll help you how to do that at the end of the video, it depends on the website. Some websites, as you can see here, like Gmail, it still displays perfectly fine with no glitchiness. Other websites still display, but they're glitched out to all high hell, like Apple's website and other stuff you can see here. It's cool that this device can still do stuff, and if you're simply searching up what's the weather or just other simple Google questions without entering websites, it can handle it fine. But to be expected, it's a browser from 2011, so it's understandable that it doesn't hold up the best, although it's still surprisingly cool of what it can still do. Web browsing overall, I'll give it a 3 out of 10. You can barely scrape by, just barely. Believe it or not, you can actually still do an immensely useful thing that millions of people use, and that's Discord, the best chatting application. To use Discord on this thing, you basically just have to use 10 cord, which is it just runs through the terminal, any terminal basically. And the cool thing is that this device has an SSH terminal application. It's kind of janky how you have to do it. You have to use an emulator for the original Palm OS apps on top of WebOS, but then you can run it through 10 cord, and as you can see here, it can still communicate through just modern Discord. Now, if you do this, I recommend using maybe an alt, just in case it's against Discord TOS, but with the 3G on, when you're out and about, you can technically still communicate with your friends on Discord on this ancient device through this janky emulator, through this terminal interface. It's super kind of ghetto, but it works perfectly. Next up in our testing was the camera test. A test of this 5 megapixel beast of a camera, and overall, I gotta say, as a person who loves digicam photography, I had a pretty fun time with this. I brought it out for some photo runs and everything, and as you can see, it does actually pretty damn well, assuming you have like a lot of light to saturate that sensor. Now, when it comes to anything lower, light-wise, as you can see right here, it starts to struggle a lot, but that's the case with a lot of older cameras. Pretty much all older phone cameras did horrible in low light. It's only like the recent 5 years now that we've seen cameras do a lot better in low light. So overall, if you're out in the daytime, this thing can tear through taking pictures. It's pretty damn good. And as a little fun test, I also just decided to compare it with a Pixel 7. Obviously immensely overpowered versus this device, but as you can see, Pixel and the Palm. Pixel and the Palm. Pixel and the Palm. So overall, not very good in 2024, but still, once again, if you're into stuff like digicam photography, you'll have a little bit of fun. And it still does some surprisingly good shots like those snow shots earlier on. Not bad at all. Next up, gaming on the Palm Pre. And this was actually a pretty fun one because, as I'll link at the end of the video, on the WebOS archive, there's an immense amount of games that can be played on this thing. It's honestly quite surprising. You have your usual suspects like Angry Birds, which was on like every device, but you also have some pretty hidden ones, as you can see coming up in a second, just simply called tanks. But the controls for this game are actually really quite cool. I don't know, just a really cool way to control the tank. And from me looking it up, this game never made it to Android or iOS, so it's stuck on this platform, which is pretty sad. It was actually quite fun, to be honest. It's like a vector rendered tank game, just quite cool graphics wise and control wise. Another game, Dead Runner. This game did also come to Android. It's a pretty fun one. It takes utilization of the motion controls on the Palm. And once again, these games are running really good. I don't know if it's like the optimization or something, because once again, you have like 512 megabytes of RAM. I remember playing Android games on phones that had like a gigabyte of RAM, and they were a lot laggier than this. I also tested one of my other Motorola devices on the same game, Dead Runner, and it was quite laggy, so it's just cool to see that these games run so well on WebOS. And otherwise, there's just an immense amount of games basically. Too much to cover here. But another cool area is the emulation side of things. The stuff like from Commodore, the NES, SNES, Game Boy, even some old Apple computers can be emulated, some applications on that. So there's a lot of stuff out there if you dig through the WebOS archive, which once again, in the description. Pretty cool stuff when it comes to gaming. Obviously there's nothing modern, but when it comes to like the nostalgia factor, or just the plentiful amount of games, hell, I'll say like 8 out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10. I had a lot of fun actually. And next up isn't exactly like an app or a game or what the phone can do, but rather how it acts. And it comes down to just, it was the true beginning, in my opinion, of the modern smartphone. As you can see here, the multitasking, I'm pretty sure it was the first phone, remember 2009. It was the first phone to take utilization of this hard style multitasking, which has been copied to all high hell in every other modern phone, as you can see. It's a really, really graceful UI. It's a super smooth OS, and one of my favorite, it just runs so well on this lower end hardware. As you can also see here, one thing that modern smartphone manufacturers should probably also copy is this bottom notification thing, how it pops up from the bottom. The reason why modern smartphone manufacturers, in my opinion, should copy this last feature is because one, they've copied everything else from WebOS, so they might as well. But second, with how huge phones are nowadays, instead of scrolling from the top, I think it'd be pretty cool to have it at the bottom. But it just goes to show how ahead of the time, ahead of the curve, WebOS was. It's a truly just magical thing to use, and if you find one for cheap, go for it. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the day-to-day stuff that you might do just daily app-wise, and that's stuff like weather, the news, and podcasts. As for the podcast application, it's actually really cool. It's called Dr. Potter, once again made by the same people that run the archive. And yes, it has an interesting name, but it runs really good. Any podcast you can think of, you could search up with the directory and you'll be able to find it. And it's still fully up to date. You can find just any modern podcast. It auto updates. You can add it to like a thing of bookmarks, so you can easily find it right when you launch the app. It's really damn cool, and as you can see here, it works fine. Now on to weather. You can see my city, of course. Very cold up here in Canada, but weather works perfectly fine. Very freezing. And you can still scrub through everything, like the temperatures and everything perfectly fine still. So I think that uses the AccuWeather API and everything, so pretty cool. And as for the last thing, and it's the most simple thing, of course, the world news. Everyone loves the news. No, I'm kidding. News is horrible nowadays. But news is working for those who want it. You can keep up to date, I guess. I don't really like to because the world is horrible right now, but it works. And honestly, the only thing this device is missing, I gotta say, is YouTube. And you might be thinking, well, that's acceptable, it's an old device. But wrong. Watch this. This BlackBerry here, in my opinion, it runs a bit better because you get that YouTube. YouTube's a big thing that I like to enjoy, so it's kind of a big caveat to like an otherwise absolutely great old device, this Palm Pre is, that it doesn't have YouTube. Because it's kind of sad that this old BlackBerry device can have a fully functional YouTube client, but the Palm Pre can't. And I know there's one called MeTube for the Palm Pre, but it's kind of iffy to get working. It's pretty slow, as you can see here. The one on the left works much better. So that's really the only caveat. If you were thinking, when am I going to cover the YouTube part of this video? Well, here you go. It just doesn't work very well. Maybe you can get it running better. Maybe you can self-host, but from here, the BlackBerry one works much better. Or, you know, literally any other modern device, which is probably what 99% of people are going to do anyways. So, yeah. Overall, the conclusion for this video, it's an absolutely awesome device still. It's a cute device. 3.1-inch screen. Awesome games. Once again, the only caveat really is I can't watch my YouTube. Now, YouTube on a screen this small would probably be pretty iffy anyways, but still, it'd be a perfect deal if I could get that working. But don't let that dissuade you. It's still cool and absolutely awesome that the community around WebOS have gotten so much stuff working. And MrMobile made a much better video about this. I was already like 80% the way done into this video before he made his video, and I was thinking to myself, should I even upload this? Because his video is going to be so much better, but I decided to do that anyways. But I'd recommend to go check his video out. He covers the archive stuff much better, how to get stuff working much better, and it's MrMobile. He's the king of phones, so I managed to get the video done, but he's gonna do a much better job. So I hope you all enjoyed this video so much. It was a fun thing to make, and I have some other phone and GPU related videos coming soon. Sorry for the 2-month break I've taken. Hope you all have a great day, night, afternoon, whatever it is for you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.